At the dawn of civilization, Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, was chosen as a site for cities to be founded. This land was fertile and flat, though due to its lack of rain, crops had trouble growing, leading farmers to develop irrigation around 6000 BCE, allowing more food to be grown in a smaller area. This led to an unprecedented population explosion in Sumer, the southern portion of Mesopotamia, and the development of specialized labor, which led to an increase in the area's wealth while attracting migrants from the surrounding lands. Many of these migrants were the Semites, and most of the migrants blended into the culture of Mesopotamia, but adapted some of their own beliefs and ideas to meld with those of Mesopotamia. As the populations grew, cities began expanding their influence, and between 3200 BCE and 2350 BCE, those cities evolved into city-states. The city-states at the beginning had a parliamentary system of government to assign public work projects to the people and give out food from the stores. As time passed and raids upon the Fertile Crescent intensified, the cities adopted monarchy as their main form of government and built huge walls for protection. The kings were also responsible for assigning workers to public projects such as walls, irrigation canals, and temples to the gods.
In about 2334 BCE, Sargon was a minister to the king of Kish. Eventually, Sargon organized a coup against the king and recruited an army. Sargon became the creator of empire in Mesopotamia and ruled from 2370 to 2315 BCE. He took over cities one by one and traveled with an army of around 5,000. When Sargon and his army came to take over a city, they made the people living there provide them with food, lodging, and financial support. Akkad was the most powerful city under Sargon. Along with the overthrow of Mesopotamian cities, Sargon seized control of trade routes with many natural resources such as silver, tin, and cedar wood. Sargon taxed very sporadically and heavily and was also very unpredictable for when he was going to tax a city. During Sargon's reign, his armies conquered as far as the Mediterranean and Black Sea. Hammurabi and the Babylonian Empire took over Mesopotamia. Hammurabi ruled from 1792 to 1750 BCE. He improved on Sargon's administration, techniques, and taxation. Hammurabi did not invade cities expecting them to give up their wealth. He invented the Code of Law, which is the most extensive law ever to be in Mesopotamia. It was the law of retribution and social class. These laws had harsh punishments for any violators and stated that Hammurabi was chosen by the gods. Hammurabi also created the lex talionis, which is the law of retaliation. An example is that if a noble destroyed the eye of another noble, their own eye would be destroyed. But if a noble destroyed the eye of a commoner, they would only pay a fine. Babylon's wealth attracted invaders such as the Hittites. The Hittites built a powerful empire in Anatolia. The Babylonian Empire fell before the Hittite assaults in 1595 BCE. The Assyrians were from northern Mesopotamia, but extended their authority to southwest Asia. The Assyrian Empire lasted from 1300 to 612 BCE. They took over Mesopotamia, Syria, Palestine, and a lot of Anatolia. King Assurbanipal called himself both King of Assyria and the King of the Universe. Nineveh was the home to King Assurbanipal's palace. Inside was a library with thousands of textbooks and administrative records. The Assyrian Empire brought wealth, comfort, and sophistication to Assur and Nineveh, but the Assyrian domination was not liked elsewhere. Their army made use of iron weapons, and unlike many armies, the Assyrian army was ranked by skill rather than family connections or birth order. There was about 50,000 troops in the Assyrian army. Many cities were upset with the Assyrian rule, and with a combination of external assaults brought the empire down in 612 BCE. Once again, Babylon dominated Mesopotamia. The new Babylonian Empire reigned from 600 to 550 BCE. This empire was also called the Chaldean Empire. King Nebuchadnezzar lavished on his capital city. He built huge and thick defensive walls surrounding the city. Inside the walls were palaces and 1,179 temples. The king's wife longed for flowers, so they made a hanging garden inside Babylon, which was the symbol of luxury in the city.
During Neolithic times, people made tools by using copper. However, copper wasn't very durable when it came to weapons and manual labor tools. So people figured out that copper combined with tin made a harder and stronger element, which was called bronze. Bronze was very rare because copper and tin alone were expensive. So combined, it was double as expensive and not many people could afford it. Bronze was used to make swords, spears, axes, shields, and armor. Bronze also had a huge impact on agriculture. Farmers used bronze knives and tools. instead of tools that were made out of bone, wood, and stone. This, in the long run, made farm work much easier. Although, in early Mesopotamia, iron was the metal of choice for weapons and tools even after bronze because it was more durable and lasted longer. Iron came from Hittite society in Anatolia experimentation. Iron deposits are much cheaper and more available than copper and tin, making bronze, and that made it the most popular metal. The wheel refined techniques of bronze and iron to come up with a means of transportation based on wheeled vehicles and sail ships. This helped with long-distance trading. The first use of the wheel took place around 35,000 BCE. Sumerians were building wheeled carts by 3000 BCE. The wheel enabled people to transport heavy loads of goods such as grain, bricks, and metal ores. Human porters and draft animals took care of the farther distances and heavier loads. This became quite popular throughout Mesopotamia and beyond. Maritime transportation came in 35,000 BCE. This allowed them to venture into the Persian Gulf. They traded regularly with merchants of northern India, and they shipped wooden textiles, leather goods, sesame oil, and jewelry to India for copper, ivory, pearls, and semi-precious stones. Mesopotamia traded with all directions. From Anatolia, they got silver. From Lebanon, they got cedar wood. Arabia gave them copper. Egypt gave gold. Persia gave tin. And northern India gave them semi-precious stones.
Cultivation allowed humans to gather wealth during this time, and cities provided many opportunities for the people to store their wealth. Kings and nobles were considered the ruling class because of their success and courage as warriors. If you were lucky enough to inherit a royal family and supporters, then you were very fortunate during this time. The goal of the priests and priestess was to ensure good fortune for their surrounding communities. Because of their kind deeds, the priests and priestess received offerings of drink, food, and clothing from city residents. Temples provided a comfortable living space for the people because of their wealth. They would also help those in need of shelter and nourishment during this time. Free commoners worked as peasants most of the time on land owned by their families. Dependent clients were working as agricultural laborers on estates owned by kings, nobles, or priestly communities. They had fewer options than free commoners did because they did not own any property. Both of them paid taxes that were usually in the form of surplus agricultural production. Slaves worked as domestic servants in wealthy households. They came from three main sources, including prisoners of war, convicted criminals, and heavily obligated individuals who had sold themselves into slavery. After several years of working as a slave, masters would often grant them freedom for their good service. During the patriarchal society, Hammurabi's laws allowed men to make all major decisions and entrusted them to rule the household. After 2000 BCE, women were given fewer rights because men were very domineering over the social and sexual behaviors of women. When 1500 BCE came around, women started to wear veils outside of their households to discourage any unwanted attention from other men.
Cuneiform writing is a system that depends on pictures and is used to keep records and communicate abstract ideas. This is combined pictographs and other symbols. The Sumerians had a powerful writing system. To write, Sumerian scribes used a stylus from a reed to put symbols on wet clay. The stylus is wedge-shaped. When the clay hardened, it preserved the message. These messages were normally documents that were saved. These documents were tax documents or commercial documents. Most education was vocational instruction to train people to work specific trades and crafts. Most people who go through formal school to learn how to read and write cuneiform go on to become scribes of government officials, or even further and become priests and physicians. Mesopotamia scholars spent their time learning mathematics and astronomy, which was crucial for agricultural studies. Studying astronomy helped them create calendars and the best planting and harvesting season for crops. Studying mathematics helped them form a year into 12 months, and then hours into the day, and then into seconds. Mesopotamians used this writing for abstract ideas, intellectual problems, and to reflect on the world. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the best known of the reflective literature in Mesopotamia. He explored themes of friendship, relations between humans and the gods, and the meaning of life and death. He also reflected on moral issues.
The Hebrews were nomads who lived in the region between Egypt and Mesopotamia around 2000 BCE. They rarely settled in cities. Abraham was a man who led a group of Hebrews to Palestine in 1850 BCE. The Hebrews used much of the Mesopotamian culture to shape their own culture. One group of Hebrews moved to Egypt in 1800 BCE and later returned to Palestine with Moses. They formed the 12 tribes and were known as the Israelites. They had a culture very similar to that of Mesopotamia. The capital of the 12 tribes was Jerusalem. The 12 tribes were collectively ruled by one ruler. Their first ruler was King David, and he ruled from 1000 to 970 BCE. Their second ruler was King Solomon, and he ruled from 970 to 930 BCE. Moses was the first man to ever preach the belief in just one God. The God that he believed in was named Yahweh. It is believed that Yahweh told Moses to write down the 10 Commandments on a stone. The 10 Commandments are a set of moral standards that followers are expected to obey. Moses' teachings were used to create a holy book known as the Torah, which was written between 800 and 400 BCE. After the Hebrews' 70-year hold on Egypt, the Assyrians took it over. They attacked at both Israel in the north and Judah in the south. They destroyed the capital city of Jerusalem. The Hebrews who survived these attacks went to Judea and became known as the Jews in 586 BCE. Holy people, known as prophets, increased faith in the Jews during this time, and the Jews began to form their own culture. The Phoenicians began settling in Phoenicia beginning around 3000 BCE. They formed city-states instead of one united country. They lived mostly on trading. They traded by land with Mesopotamia and by sea for raw materials to make their manufactured goods. Though their trading with Mesopotamia had the greatest impact on their culture, the trade by sea gave them the most materials. The Phoenicians did very little farming. However, they were the first culture to create a written alphabet in 1500 BCE.
Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, linguists perceived the significant resemblances in vocabulary and grammar structure of the languages from Europe, Southwest Asia, and India. The only explanation for the verbal coincidence was that speakers of Indo-European languages were all descendants of ancestors who migrated from their original homeland and spoke a shared language. The steppe region of Ukraine and Russia, and the region of the Black and Caspian Sea, was where Indo-European speakers first originated, and they mainly lived by herding cattle, sheep, and goats. Between 4500 and 2500 BCE, the earliest of the Indo-Europeans built their society. They were able to domesticate horses and use them as a source of food, but also began to ride them as well during 4000 BCE. Sumerian knowledge of bronze metal and wheels began to spread around 3000 BCE, and soon after they developed ways to hitch carts, wagons, and chariots to horses they domesticated. This enabled them to develop transportation technologies, making everything much more faster and more efficient than ever before.
As the Indo-European population grew and became more successful, their societies gradually spread, with people packing up and leaving as time went on. As with other early migrations, this happened 1 or 2 families at a time, not as a mass exodus. Those going to Mesopotamia were the Hittites, who conquered Babylon and were the dominant empire in the region for almost 400 years. The reason that they were able to forge their empire was that they developed both a lighter, spoked wheel for fast, horse-drawn chariot archers, and later developed iron metallurgy, allowing them to make iron weapons and tools that weren't as brittle. To the east, people migrated all of the way into western China, melding with local cultures as time passed. To the west, people spread to Greece, Italy, Britain, Germany, France, and the Iberian Peninsula, farming off the land to live, with their languages slowly becoming more distinct from each other. To the south, the Medes and Persians moved near Iran, and the Aryans moved into northern India. Over the course of over 5,000 years, Mesopotamia developed the first unified code of laws, saw the rise and fall of numerous empires, witnessed miracles of engineering, and nurtured civilization into dominance.